I appreciate the Majority Leader allowing us to do this. And to the President, Presiding Officer, thank you very much for trying to fix a difficult problem called immigration. I'm going to start with what drives my train the most. I want to fix a broken immigration system. There are 800,000 DACA recipients who are going to go into chaos March the 5th if we don't do something. As to the President, I think you were right to end this program and give Congress a chance to fix it through the legislative process. I thought President Obama overreached through executive action. You said at March 5th, we're going to replace DACA with legislation. The only way that works, Mr. President, is for you to help us and lead us to the right answer. But the one thing I can tell you that drives my train the most is rebuilding a broken military. We have an opportunity here to fix two problems. Help the men and women in the military who have suffered mightily from sequestration, to get them more money at a time they need it, and to provide certainty to 800,000 young people who have no other country to call home than America. Begin to repair a broken border, start transforming a broken immigration system, marching to comprehensive reform in phase 2. But the reason I'm here tonight is I see an opportunity to do something that we should have done years ago: increase defense spending consistent with the threats we face. Here's what Defense Secretary Mattis said June 12, 2017. No enemy in the field has done more to harm the combat readiness of our military than sequestration. Congress has shot down more planes and sunk more ships by denying the military the assets they need to build new equipment, to replace old equipment, to keep people in the field in the fight, and other people trained, ready to go to the fight. General Milley, the Chief Staff of the Army, said, if we return to sequestration, the Army will be required to draw down in strength even further, reduce funding for readiness, increase the risk of sending untrained and poorly equipped soldiers into harm's way. So this is the head of the Army saying that if we can't get our act together and increase military funding in a more permanent way, if we go back into sequestration, you're requiring me to increase the risk of sending undertrained and poorly equipped soldiers into harm's way. If that doesn't motivate you, what will? Permanent relief from the Budget Control Act with predictability funding is absolutely critical to rebuilding Air Force capability, capacity, and readiness. We have lost a lot of capacity. Our readiness is at an all-time low because we're having to rob Peter to pay Paul to keep the planes in the air in the Air Force. The Budget Control Act and cap sequestration has cost us between $4 and $5 billion due to the starting and stopping of acquisition programs, the inability to start new programs. That's the Navy Secretary, October 28th. I could go through line by line what's happened under sequestration. 62% of the F-18s in the Marine Corps and the Navy can't fly because we don't have enough spare parts. We have a chance here to fix that problem. To my Democratic colleagues, I am convinced that you care about this too. I am convinced that you will work with President Trump to increase military funding and the Majority Leader, Senator McConnell. I want to thank Senator McConnell for putting a number on the table consistent with the problems we face in the military. It's $130 billion over 2 years. To my Democratic friends, I do expect you to get some non-defense spending increases because sequestration is hurt across the board. The NIH has been kept alive because of a bipartisan effort. The FBI will have less agents this year than they did in 2013 because of sequestration. The CIA, the NSA, all of these defense programs under the non-defense portion of the budget have suffered, and they need help too. So what I would like to do is to ask the Congress to stop the S show and grow up. Act consistent with the greatness of this country. Find a way to work together on a layup. If you're looking for political cover to deal with increased military funding, 70% of the people plus believe we need more military funding. If you're looking for political cover to deal with the DACA population, 82% of the DACA population are supported by the public. 82% of the public supports a pathway to citizenship for the DACA population. I can't find too many issues that poll like that. This is Fox News poll, which means it's true. 79% of Americans and 63% of Trump voters favor granting citizenship to legal immigrants under 30 who are brought here as children. 63% of Trump voters understand that we need border security, but they have no animosity toward these young people who came here at the age of 6 on average and literally have lived their lives here with no place else to go. And here's the good news. We'd be crazy to want them to leave. If you met any of these DREAM Act kids, the last thing you want them to do is leave. There's some bad people in every population. There are 900 people in the population of DREAM Act DACA kids that are in the military. 20,000 teachers. So on March 5th, I don't want someone to have to deal with the fact that a 5th grade teacher who everybody likes has got to leave the country. That's insane. So I know that my Democratic colleagues will support more defense funding with the understanding that the Congress, through legislation, deal with the DACA problem. And that they're willing to put money into the system for border security. They're willing to make a down payment on changing our immigration system to more merit. At the end of the day, there is a deal to be had. It just needs to be done. And the reason this bipartisan group that I'm a part of came about is because nobody was doing much of anything. I'm not getting in anybody's way. We've had months to figure out what to do. Just a couple of weeks ago, less than a couple of weeks ago, the 4 whips of the House and the Senate began to work on this. To be honest with you, that's a bit late. As to the President, we can't do this without you. This was one of the centerpieces of your campaign, immigration. President Obama tried and failed, and I appreciate his effort. President Bush tried and failed, and I appreciate what he did, and I worked with both of them across the aisle to pass bills that went through the Senate with 60-plus votes to only go to the House and die. I'm tired of that scenario. To my House colleagues, I know this is tough politics for you, but if President Trump can find a way to lead us to a solution, I think it will allow the House to finally act. On Tuesday, we had an unusual meeting with the President of the United States, where about 40 members of the House and the Senate from both sides of the aisle spent 55 minutes on national TV watching President Trump listen, cajole, and urge us to find a bipartisan solution. This is what he said Tuesday. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that. But it also has to be a bill where we're able to secure our border. You're right, Mr. President. Security and compassion are not inconsistent. As a matter of fact, you don't have one without the other. Let's do phase 1 and go to comprehensive tomorrow. He urged us to come up with a bipartisan product, and he wants to sign it. President Trump on Tuesday showed a command of the issues, the right approach to a difficult problem, urging us to work together in a bipartisan fashion, talked about security is essential, but understood that compassion and love have to be part of this because these kids literally have no place to go. They have put their roots down in America. They were brought here by their parents. And I don't believe President Trump wants to kick them out March the 5th. To my friends at the White House, on 4 January, we had a meeting of Republicans with the president, and I went over the bipartisan proposal that I was working on with Senator Durbin, Garner, Flake, Bennett, and later Senator Menendez. Nobody was surprised as to what we were doing. I said, this is a good position to start from. Can it be made better? Yes. Senator Tillis and Lankford have the Succeed Act. We met with them, and I think we adopted a lot of your good ideas. So at the end of the day, the DREAM Act by Senator Graham and Durbin became more like the Succeed Act. Thursday, about 10 o'clock, I get a phone call from Senator Durbin. I just talked to the president to let him know that we've reached an agreement. On 4 January, I said we're 99% there. Senator Durbin called me, said I had a good conversation with the president. He wants to hear what we've done. He's encouraged by it. And I made a request to go to the White House. General Kelly came over at about 11. I went through the proposal, which had been shared numerous times. And he said, what about this? What about that? I said, it's all about getting the process started. General Kelly, we're not going to get comprehensive on our side for DACA. We're not going to give them 11 million legal status and hope one day we'll deal with border security and merit-based immigration. We got to have a phase one that's a down payment on all the 4 areas outlined by the president. By the time we got there, at noon, there were more people at the meeting. And all I can say is what happened between Tuesday and Thursday, I don't know. Between 10 and 12, I don't know. But it took us in the wrong direction. The president that I saw on Tuesday is the man that can close this deal and lead this country to get an answer that Obama and Bush could never get. We are where we are. To my good friend, Senator Perdue, I share your desire to replace chain migration with merit-based immigration. One day we'll have a system where the nuclear family gets green cards, which will free up millions of green cards for a workforce we desperately need. The only way you'll get that is to deal with the Democrats and give them what they're wanting out of this deal. They're not going to give us what we want the most, which is legal immigration, secure border, and a merit-based immigration system based on DACA, and let me tell you why. What leverage do they have with the 10 million illegal immigrants that they would like to see have a better life too? Almost none. To my colleagues on the other side, from the very first day I sat down and talked to you, what did I tell you? I have no animosity toward the 11 million. I just don't want any crooks or bad people. Let's get them right with the law. Let's transition to a system. We do not do this every 20 years. Let's secure our border, increase legal immigration, have an e-verify system that works and put people in jail who are illegals in the future. Let's give the 11 million who can come out of the shadows and not criminals a chance to get right with the law by paying a fine, passing an English proficiency exam over time, getting in the back of the line of the country where they come from, and 10 years later, they can apply for a green card. A pathway to citizenship that I think would be earned. How did 11 million people get here? They did not sneak up on us. If you know anything about the economy of South Carolina, there's a lot of tourism, and it's a heavy service industry. If you go to a golf course in South Carolina, you'll see beautiful golf courses maintained by good people. And you're going to see mostly Hispanics. If you go to a meat packing plant in South Carolina, you're going to see people doing a job you wouldn't want, making a decent living, working really hard, and most of them are Hispanic. How did this happen? Most of us looked the other way as people came to our country trying to better their lives. Some crooks, some rapists, some drug dealers, mostly really good people trying to improve their lot in life. And all I ask is that we fix this system once and for all so we don't have a third wave 20 years from now, but deal with the reality that these people are here, they've been here for a long time, and America always needs good people, not just from Norway, but from all over the world. We need a reliable partner at the White House. General Kelly, I admire greatly. He lost a son in the service to our nation. He's been leading Marines in combat for decades. He's new to being Chief of Staff. Did a heck of a job creating order out of chaos. But at that meeting, he said something I take exception to. You got to stop fiddling. General Kelly, as much as I admire you, for 10 years, I and many others in this body have been trying to find a way forward to fix an immigration system that's broken, to turn it into a merit-based immigration system over time, to get the 11 million right with the law, increase legal immigration so employers don't have to cheat, and make our nation better and stronger. So I haven't been fiddling. What I asked the White House is find out what you're for. I can't read your mind. This proposal just picked up support from more Republicans. We didn't write the Bible, but we gave the president his funding for FY18 for the wall and security outside the wall. I don't believe we're going to get $10 or $20 billion funded in 1 year. I don't think that's possible. We began to break chain migration within the DACA population. We limit green cards to the nuclear family, which is a down payment on a merit-based immigration system. We eliminate the diversity lottery because it's a bad way to give out visas. And we took those 50,000 visas and said, why don't we do the following? Create a merit-based program for underserved countries who are mostly in Africa. Here's what I believe. Merit-based immigration all over the world, not just in Europe. What's made us special and unique is that we come from everywhere. We're nobodies where we came from, and we can be a somebody here. And I've said a couple of times, and I'll say it again, Norway's a great place. If you're from Norway, you're a Norwegian. If you're from America, what are you? You will not know us by the way we look. You will not know us by the way we talk, because Dick Durbin has an accent. We talk differently. We look differently. But we have a lot in common. And out of the many, we've become one. In an effort to decide who comes to America in the future, to fix a broken immigration system, one thing I will never give into, changing what it means to be an American. There are people from all over the globe dying to get here. We can't accept everybody. But we need to make sure that as we go forward in the future, we do not forget our past. Out of every country all over the globe, we've created something special here. Everybody's got a story. My grandfather came from Scotland, Lindsey Graham, could barely read or write. Neither one of my parents finished high school. And I'm in the Senate thanks to the good people of South Carolina. Everybody's got a story. I don't want those stories to end. I want new chapters, one after another. So, to the president, what I saw Tuesday was a man that understood what America was all about, was a leader who understood that bipartisanship must occur, understood that love and security are not mutually exclusive. What I find today is complete chaos. To think that our Democratic colleagues are going to give us everything we want on defense and hope one day we'll deal with the DACA population is a bit unrealistic. And count me in for being on your side there. I don't want to put these kids through any more hell. I don't want to wait to March 4th. I want to go ahead and get it done now. We should have done it years ago. And I want to get a down payment on border security and change a broken immigration system, but we can't do it all at once because everybody tells me comprehensive won't work. So let's figure a way to chop it up in two parts. You got to start somewhere. So here we are trying to figure out what the hell to do. Let me tell you what we should do. We should listen to the American people. We should do what they want us to do, which is to take care of the DACA population, rebuild the military, and start fixing a broken immigration system. If we just did what 70% of the American people want us to do, we'd figure this out. As to the 30%, you have your right to think what you want. Along with other Republicans, I've been called every name under the sun, and I'm still standing. There are people who will never let us get to yes because they have an irrational view of what it takes to fix this system. There are voices in the White House that we all know very well that's been telling us for years, you have too much legal immigration and everything is amnesty. Mr. President, don't listen to that voice or those voices, because if you do, you're going to be right where Obama and Bush were. They tried and they failed. But we don't have the luxury of failing anymore. March 5th will be here before you know it. And I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and watch these young DACA recipients have their life turned upside down because we're better than as a nation. But equally, but more important, I am not going to go any longer in allowing sequestration to destroy the military at the time we need it the most. Look through the eyes of a soldier and you'll find out what to do on the military. Look through the eyes of a DACA recipient and you'll find out what to do there. Don't be blinded by loud voices and hateful people. We owe it to this great nation to fix hard problems. We owe it to those who are in the fight to give them the equipment they need to win a war we can't afford to lose. We owe it to the families of military members to have more certainty, not to be deployed so much. We owe it to ourselves to get these DACA kids right with the law because they'll add value to our country. To my Democratic colleagues, now's the time. Give us the space. To my Republican colleagues, this is a defining moment for our party. Are we going to continue to be the party that can't get to yes? Are we going to continue to be the party that always has a reason not to do DACA? Or are we going to be the party that finally realizes these young men and women add value to our country and we welcome them with open arms, and they got to work to stay, and they will. So to the defense hawks, the only way you're going to get your money is to deal with immigration rationally. Senator Durbin, we don't agree on a lot. I bet if you looked at our votes, we're 90% one way versus the other. But for 10 years, you have been a really good partner on comprehensive immigration reform. You have given, you have made people mad on your side. To those who think you're going to deal Senator Durbin out, you know zero about this issue. To Senator Menendez, you know the story of America better than I do, because your family came here because they had to. America allowed you to leave a place that was horrible. And boy, is that a great experiment in how things can turn out well. You cancel out my vote most of the time, but I appreciate you being here in this body trying to find a way forward for future immigrants. Your voice on this issue has meant a lot to me because I have not walked in your shoes. Senator Bennett, thank you for being calm when a lot of us get hot. Thank you for caring about the meat packers, because that's important to Colorado. Thank you for trying to push your party to yes. To the people who've worked with me in the past on the Democratic side, some may say you've given nothing. I think you've given a good bit. I think we have to. Senator Flake, you're from Arizona. You and Senator McCain know this issue better than I do. He knows what it takes to secure the border, but he also understands the benefit of illegal immigration being fixed for the good of the country. Senator Garner, I didn't know you much at all. You're the NRC chairman trying to make sure we hold on to this body, and God, I hope we do. Nothing personal, but I hope we do. I am amazed at how strong you have been. You have been under a tremendous amount of pressure to get out of this deal-making business, and you have withstood that pressure. And the people of Colorado should be very proud of you and Senator Bennett. You don't agree on a lot, but on this, you have been champions. To the other people who came on board supporting the concept, the proposal, either in totality or the idea we need to move forward, on my side of the aisle, I cannot thank you more. The well is pretty poisoned. To the White House, I want to help you, but you got to help yourself. There's a way to do business around here that stood the test of time. And there's some things that will hurt you over time. When people want to help you, you may not agree with them, but you know they want to help you, take the help. When people disagree with you, understand there's always tomorrow. To President Trump, you won the election, you beat me. Only you, quite frankly, Mr. President, can fix this problem because you have credibility, others don't. Don't let this moment pass. Don't take us backward. Take us forward. Thank you all for trying really hard for a long period of time to do the right thing. With that, I yield.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, first let me thank my colleague from South Carolina. We've worked together for years, mainly on this issue. And I just want to tell you, he has demonstrated extraordinary insight and extraordinary courage, time and again. I know we wouldn't even be standing here in this conversation without him. Lindsey, thank you. I know that some of the challenges that I put before you have made life more difficult, and I hope you understand that I always knew you wanted to come to yes. You always wanted to fix this problem. One of the things which he said, which I'd like to share, is the passion we feel on this side of the aisle for the security of America. This morning I was invited for breakfast with Secretary Mattis at the Department of Defense. I was happy to vote for his confirmation. He's another patriot, a man who served as a 4-star general in the Marine Corps. I respect him very much, and I want to help him. As the ranking member of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, I know what these dollar figures mean. It isn't just numbers on a page. We're talking about what Secretary Mattis told us this morning, a delay, another CR. This 4th CR this year cost the Pentagon millions of dollars. Millions of dollars to maintain the same spending level they had last year. That's wasteful. How many families across America would say, well, I'm going to write exactly the same checks in January 2018 I wrote in January 2017. That's mindless, and that's where you are with a CR. You just keep repeating the same things over and over at great expense. We owe it to the Department of Defense, we owe it to the men and women in the military, and we owe it to our people we represent to keep this nation safe. But I have to agree with Senator Graham. We cannot ignore that there are other things that are priorities and importance. In the non-defense area, to think that we would shortchange the Department of State, an agency of government which you have responsibility for in the Appropriations Committee, is a short-sighted effort which even Secretary Mattis would be quick to say makes no sense at all. We should be giving our Department of State the resources and people they need to make sure that we are dealing at the area of diplomacy as opposed to war. That's just one example. Add the FBI, add the Department of Homeland Security. They all need to be properly funded. We cannot run the government of the United States of America the strongest and biggest economy in the world, one of the most powerful nations in the world, lurching from week to week and month to month with a budget. For goodness sakes, I plead with the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate, give us something we can work on together. And a good place to start is look for bipartisanship. There are Democrats willing to sit down and work with you to solve the problems. But when we're given a take it or leave it budget proposal for 4 weeks at a time, it is a terrible way to run a country. And I hope that the leaders come to that same conclusion. Let me zero in on the issue that brings most of us to the floor tonight, which was addressed by Senator Graham. I've been at this for a while, a long while. My goal is to make sure that those who were brought to this country as children, who grew up in this country, and as Bob Menendez has said so forcefully and effectively, pledged allegiance to that flag every morning in the classrooms across America. I have been fighting for years to give them a chance to be part of America, the only country many of them have ever known. It's been a struggle. When I couldn't pass the DREAM Act or get 60 votes in the Senate, I went to President Obama and begged him to help, and he did. He created DACA. By presidential executive order, he created an opportunity for ultimately 780,000 young people to step up and get protection from deportation and the right to legally work in America. It's been an amazing experience. As Senator Graham said, it's hard to pick any large population in this country and not end up with some people who will embarrass you or some bad apples. But I will tell you consistently, over and over again, these young people, these dreamers, these young people protected by DACA have shown us over and over again why they have earned our confidence and trust. They work so hard to be part of this country. Those of us who were lucky enough to be born here never went through what they have gone through. Learning that you're undocumented, realizing that doors are just closed automatically no matter how good you are and how hard you work, and they kept at it. And Mr. President, I want to tell you, we should be proud of them and we should embrace them as the future of America because they bring so many talents and skills and good values to our country. Well, with the DACA program in place and all the people protected, the new president came in and said, I'm going to end it. September 5th of last year, he announced that it would end as of March 5th this year, and then as of October 1st, they would stop renewing DACA protection. Well, what's happened, 16,000 of these DACA-protected young people have fallen out of a protected status. Luckily, a California court last week said, keep protecting them until we resolve some other issues. So they have a temporary, momentary protective order in their, at least that they can turn to when it comes to this California decision. But there's no certainty of what happens next. When I hear Senator McConnell and others come to the floor and say there's no hurry, I invite them to meet some of these young people. I met a group in New York. There were about 12 of them in college, DACA protected. They're working to get through college because they don't qualify for any federal assistance because they're undocumented. And as they went around the room, they said, Senator, we want to each tell you something. 500 days, 420 days. Each one of them was telling me how many days they had left of DACA protection before they were subject to deportation and could no longer legally work in America. So to say there's no hurry is to overlook the obvious. These young people are torn apart. Their families are torn apart because of our lack of action. Well, Senator Graham and I decided to do something about it, and we invited some good friends to join us. On the Democratic side, Michael Bennet of Colorado and Robert Menendez of New Jersey. We've been through this war before when we worked on comprehensive immigration reform. On the Republican side, Senator Garner of Colorado, Senator Flake of Arizona, who's on the floor, and Senator Graham. And we worked at it for a long, long time. We had moments that looked like we were going to fall apart and never reach a conclusion, and we finally came together. And last Tuesday, a week ago, when the president invited 26 of us to the White House and made his plea that we do something, we decided to sit down and do it, and we did. In a matter of 24 to 48 hours, we reached a final agreement on this bipartisan approach to deal with this issue of DACA. And that's what we presented to the president when we went to the White House last Thursday. I couldn't agree with Senator Graham more. That president of last Tuesday is the one we need again. That president who said to us that this is an act of love, what we are doing. That president who said to us, send me a bill and I will sign it and I'll take the political heat. That president who agreed with us that you couldn't do everything in immigration reform in one bill, but you had to divide it. He agreed with that. I agree with him. That's the way we should move forward. I hope the president listens to Senator Graham and others in his own party and steps up and helps us finish this responsibility. Let me say a word or two about another effort underway. At that meeting 8 days ago, Tuesday of last week in the White House, there was a suggestion that the leaders in the Senate and House, both parties, should sit down and see if they can come up with an alternative. That was headed up by Kevin McCarthy of California. I like him. I don't know him well. I've not worked with him on many things, but I will have to tell you he is a positive person. He is trying to come to a conclusion of something that might work, and we met today in his office to talk about it. At the meeting was Senator Cornyn of Texas, who's the whip of the Republican senators, myself, and Steny Hoyer, the Democratic whip of the House of Representatives. With us, General John Kelly and Secretary Nielsen of the Department of Homeland Security. We met for about an hour and a half. It is the first attempt at a substantive meeting that we've had since this group started meeting 5 days ago. In the meantime, our staff has met 4 or 5 times, but this was the first time that senators and congressmen sat down across the table. Needless to say, and no surprise to all of us because we've been through this so many times, we really couldn't agree on the basics of how we got started here. And I said to Congressman McCarthy, the leader, the Republican leader in the House, this is hard work, this is heavy lifting, this takes time. People have to be convinced and have a chance to state their point of view. We don't have that much time. We're dealing with a deadline of January 19th, and that happens to be just around the corner, 2 days away. And we're dealing with a deadline of March 5th, which sadly could be a deadline where if we fail to meet it, you could see many, many people's lives changed. So I've agreed to continue to meet with this group, but I tell them over and over, we already have a bill here in the Senate. We have a bipartisan bill. We address all the issues that the president raised when we had our meeting in the White House Tuesday last week. This is a starting point. In fact, I think it's a good end point for us to point at. Let me thank Senator Graham for expanding the number of Republican sponsors. Mr. President, I do the math of the Senate. I've said that as whip of the Senate, I learned all the skills I needed for this job in the first grade, how to count to 60. And that's what it takes many times in the Senate to move controversial issues forward. Well, we have 49 Democratic senators. I believe they are all prepared to vote for this compromise that we brought before us, this bipartisan compromise. As of today, we've added 7, I should say we have 7 Republicans who have joined us in this effort. The math is simple. We have 56 senators ready to move forward on this issue. It'll only take 4 more, and I believe they are there. I've spoken to Republican senators who said, maybe I can't sponsor it, but I sure want to see it pass. So I think ultimately, if we are given a chance to vote on this measure and move it forward, we can do it on a bipartisan basis, one of the few times, rare times, that happens around this chamber. And in doing that, we're going to solve a problem that the president challenged us with, to replace DACA. It's a good approach, the one that we put together. I don't like all of it, but that's what a compromise is all about. I hope that my colleagues will join me in a bipartisan effort to make sure that before we go home this week, we move forward on this DACA issue so that we can say to these young people, we hear you, we literally feel your pain, and we want to be there to make sure you have a future in America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
I appreciate this colloquy and appreciate my colleagues that have been through a lot on this proposal, and many of us worked in prior years on immigration reform measures. And I think we build up a level of trust between us that helps on these issues. Senator Durbin is right. There are a couple of times where you just throw your hands up and say, I don't know if we can get there. But our staff worked hard and well, and I do believe that we have a proposal that can get 60 votes. We have worked so long under rules of reconciliation that sometimes we forget we've got to get 60 votes around here. That's what this bill is designed to do. In the end, that's what it's going to take, 60 votes. I come from Arizona. We have a lot of dreamers there, obviously, some 50,000. I've met so many of them over the years. And to say that they deserve this is an understatement. They've waited so long, some of them delaying education, not knowing what's on the other side, not being able to get the kind of job that they need because of uncertainty moving ahead. These are people, as Senator Graham said, that we want here. We ought to roll out the red carpet and say, please stay here and help build your country. This is the only country they know. They have everything but the papers. So I hope that we can move forward on this. Let me just talk about a few aspects of the proposal. There are some who have said that the Democrats are unwilling to give on this. And I hear that on my side of the aisle. Well, I can tell you, any compromise proposal, anything that is a bipartisan proposal, both sides are going to give. All sides are going to give. And on this one, the DREAM Act, which I'm a sponsor of, would have a faster path to citizenship for kids. This is a slower path here. That was a big give on the Democratic side, from some 5 years to 12. That's not easy. That's not easy to tell people. You'll have to wait a little longer, a lot longer than you expected. But it's part of the legislative process. I know a lot of people aren't keen on some of the structure that'll go along the border, whether it's called a wall or whatever. But those of us in border states realize that we need better infrastructure, we need better security, we need better technology, we need more manpower, and it's all a compromise. That's what it's about. And that's why I appreciate this process, and I know that if we allow this to come to the floor and are able to present this proposal to our colleagues, we'll have a lot more support than we have already on the Republican side. It was said by some on our side today that the only way we can move forward is if we get an okay from the White House, if we know what they want and what the president will sign. I'm not sure that we'll ever get there unless we actually put a proposal on the floor of the Senate and debate it and vote on it. At that point, then we'll know. Then the White House will come and say, yes, I can support that, or we can support that with this change or that change. But if we're waiting for the White House to come to us with a proposal that they can support, we'll likely be waiting a long time. Many of us met starting 6 weeks ago with the White House asking for proposals on the border. Tell us, we said, what the White House can live with, what is needed, what is a must-have. We waited and waited and waited for weeks, and then got a big proposal with just about everything thrown in. I would submit that we've got to put something on the floor, and that this proposal is ready. I think we ought to continue over the next couple of days to build support, add Republican and Democratic co-sponsors, and then I would ask our leadership, put this on the floor. Let's see where the votes are. We have a short period of time. We don't have much runway. The last thing we want to do is come right up against the deadline, right up against March 5th. We have the administration has asked the High Court to rule on whether or not there can be any further extensions, or if March 5th is the deadline. It's my opinion the court will come back and say, yes, that's it. We've got to be ready for that. We can't afford to wait anymore. It's time with this proposal to put it on the floor. Again, I thank my colleagues for their work on this. I thank the White House, those who have sat down, and the president's comments the other day that this needs to be a bill of love, I think that it is. And it's also, as Senator Durbin said, it's also a bill that is tough, that has border security elements. We want to make sure that we're not in this situation a few years from now. But we've got to have a bill, first and foremost, that has support to pass the House and the Senate. That's what this is. This is, make no mistake, this is the bipartisan approach. This is the only game in town. As much as others want to say that they're going to reach an agreement, they are basically where we were a few months ago. They've got a long way to go. We have a proposal here that can garner enough support to pass the Senate. So let's move on with it, Mr. President. And with that, I'll yield back, or turn it over, I guess, to Senator Menendez.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me first start off thanking my colleague from Colorado who got here a little earlier than me, giving me the opportunity to move ahead. My daughter's in town, and I'd like to see her, but this is important, so I appreciate your courtesy. And I'm thankful for Senator Durbin's, as someone who's been involved in immigration reform for the better part of the 26 years that I've been in the House and the Senate. His passion on this singular issue within the overall immigration question is unquestionable about how we take care of these young people who in every respect except for birth are Americans, and it's been extraordinary, and so they couldn't have a better champion, Dick, and I appreciate that. To my friend and colleague, Lindsey Graham, I appreciate your courage, because it's not one of those things you really have to tackle. And I appreciate your understanding of the institution as to how to get there, and your knowledge about bringing people together. I don't always like what I hear from you, but by the same time, I'm sure you don't always like what you hear from me, particularly on this issue, but nonetheless, you're just an extraordinary American. And to the rest of my colleagues, certainly Senator Bennett, who was part of the Gang of Eight, that we went through this a couple of years ago, and we were trying to, and passed in this very same body with 68 votes. Comprehensive immigration reform that unfortunately just languished in the House of Representatives. We wouldn't be talking about any of this largely today. We'd be well on our path to border security, well on our path to future flows, well on our path to what immigration would look like in the future, and of course, a pathway for all of those who has worked hard in this country, obeyed the law in every other respect, and find a pathway forward. And Senator Flake, who is part of that group, I really appreciate it. We don't always agree on everything. On foreign policy, we have a disagreement here or two, but on this, we have been locked in laser-like, and I appreciate his willingness, especially in the final year that he has decided to serve here, to take on this challenge. So I appreciate that as well. We're about working on finding common ground on some of the most pressing immigration issues that really go to so many things: the national security, the national economy. I can't secure America if I don't know who is here to pursue the American dream versus who is here to do it harm. For that, you have to bring people out of the shadows into the light and have them go through a criminal background check and know. I can't thrust that economy even beyond into warp drive unless we have everybody fully participating in an open above-the-ground economy contributing. And one of the most urgent of these is the uncertainty faced by 800,000 dreamers across America who qualified for a protected status under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program we call DACA. Now, it's no secret that I deeply disagree with the President's decision to end DACA. In my view, nothing good could come out of a decision that jeopardized the lives of 800,000 DACA recipients, including 22,000 in my home state of New Jersey, living lawfully under DACA, working, studying across our country. This is a program that I advocated with the previous administration with President Obama. Congressman Gutierrez and I, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, were there. Actually gave him legal memos by attorneys from across the country's experts in this field, why we thought he had the power to do what he had, and I still think that's true. But regardless of that point, we're beyond that. DACA was never a perfect program, nor was it a replacement for a truly comprehensive immigration reform. An effort I remain committed today, as I was in 2013 when we passed that historic reforms to our immigration systems, the greatest passed in the Senate since the days of President Ronald Reagan. But DACA still did tremendous good for this country. It allowed 800,000 upstanding, undocumented, bright young people who came to this country as children through no decision of their own to come out of the shadows, step into the light, pursue their dreams without fear of deportation, without fear that the knock at the door was not a member of their family coming back home from work or their neighbor, but an immigration agent. Now, when we talk about dreamers, we're talking about young men and women who have grown up American in every sense of the word. The only country they know as home is the United States of America. The only flag they pledge allegiance to is that red, white, and blue with the stars, the flag of the United States. The only national anthem they know and want to sing is the Star-Spangled Banner. The only country they know is America. They are not undocumented immigrants, they are undocumented Americans who have proven themselves to be a great asset to this nation. Dreamers are studying in our colleges, they're playing on our sports teams, they're teaching in our schools. And they're wearing, Senator Graham talked about our military and the need to, respond to the economics of our military needs. Many of these young people are wearing the uniform of the United States, putting themselves at risk to defend the only country they know. They're innovating in our economy, enriching our communities, and otherwise obeying our laws. And most of all, loving this country because it's their country too. Yet the administration slapped an arbitrary expiration date on their dream. And in doing so, the president created a national emergency, one that only Congress can solve. So that's what we in the Gang of Six set out to do. Now, is this proposal ideal for me, the son of immigrants, representing one of the most diverse states in the nation? I can tell you, absolutely not. Is it ideal for my friend, Lindsey, or Senator Flake? I would expect to say they would say no. But that's the reality of compromise. That's what governing is all about. It's about making tough decisions in order to advance the greater good. This deal is not ideal to any of us, but it's acceptable to all of us. And if more of our colleagues join us, I believe it will be ultimately acceptable to the president as well. Now, despite the messages sent by the administration, I have to believe, in order to keep on going, I have to believe that the president meant what he said when he called our dreamers remarkable kids. I have to believe the many times I've heard him speak about dreamers with compassion, about treating these bright young people with heart. I have to believe that when I sat around that conference table with my colleagues at the White House, the president meant what he said when he spoke of an immigration system that encourages people to do a good job and to have a resolution that is one of love. Well, I will tell all of my colleagues what I told President Trump that day once the cameras turned off and we had the room to ourselves. I told him he had the political capital to spend. That President Nixon was the ultimate anti-communist, and yet he was the one who opened up China. That President Reagan was the most anti-tax Republican ever elected, and yet he ultimately saw the need to increase rates. No one questions this president's harsh views on immigration, which is precisely why he has the opportunity to do something big. During last week's bipartisan summit, the president said that if Democrats and Republicans reached a deal, he would sign it. He told us to develop a proposal, one that resolved the DACA challenge and protected America's dreamers and addressed tough issues like border security, family reunification, and diversity visas. He gave us that charge, and we came together and ran with it. A lot of hours were spent, many more by our staffs, hashing out the issues in search of common ground. And finally, we arrived at an agreement that I believe Congress can and must send to the president's desk before it's too late. Now, let me be clear. Striking this deal was no picnic. To my Republican colleagues who say this bill isn't tough enough, I encourage you to take a closer look. Look at the hard choices that I had to make as the most senior Hispanic American in the United States Congress, as the son of immigrants whose parents' thirst for freedom brought them to these shores, as the senior senator from New Jersey, one of the most ethnically and racially diverse states in the nation. Never could I have imagined, for instance, accepting fundamental changes to the diversity visa program, because diversity, in my view, is one of America's great strengths, and New Jersey is living proof. In my state, it's hard to find any community that hasn't been touched in a positive way by the diversity visa program. And I remind my colleagues that every night, in the darkest corners of the world, there are people who pray with all of their might for the opportunity to win a diversity visa, which, by the way, you have to pass all of the background checks, criminal and otherwise, in order to still come to this country. It isn't a grab bag. You still have to go through a series of metrics, and you have to go through a series of backgrounds. And no, they're not looking even to win $1 million. They want to win a 1 in a million chance to come to America. Nor have I ever supported building a wall at our southern border, any type of it, even when the president told us that Mexico was going to pay for it. But the president must know that this proposal includes billions of dollars for his border security priorities, from barrier constructions and development to southwest border technology acquisition. And then, of course, there are the restrictions on family reunification. I don't believe in this chain migration. When you want to dehumanize people, you talk about chain migration. It's family reunification. But however you call it, the restrictions on family reunification that our Republican counterparts insisted. New limits on what some divisively call chain migration. For example, legal permanent residents already of the United States will no longer be able to sponsor their adult children to join them in America. That's a big deal. For those of us, that's a big deal. For me, this was a tough decision as it imposes a limitation on our legal system of family immigration, one that I only accepted after we secured other measures to streamline reunification for spouses and young children. And that's not the only hard choice we had to make when it came to families. Yes, this legislation gives dreamers the opportunity to earn a 12-year path to citizenship. But the price we pay for that earned pathway to citizenship is that we provide no such path for the parents who brought the dreamers here illegally. As a result, dreamers will not be able to petition for their parents, but their parents will be eligible for temporary legal status and work permits. That's an incredibly difficult choice for me, but we did it. Ultimately, I accepted it because it keeps families together, which I have always thought both parties were always about. Family values, the family unit, the family as the center of American life. And so this proposal protects parents from deportation. It leaves open the possibility to fight another day to provide a pathway for parents to earn citizenship. Now, the president spoke of taking heat for a compromise on dreamers, but let me tell you this. as the most senior Hispanic American in Congress, I will get a whole lot, and have already, a lot of heat on these concessions. But I will gladly take that heat in order to protect dreamers who deserve to stay in the only home and the only country they have ever known. Look, we all know that there will be voices on the far left and voices on the far right that say this deal makes too many compromises. To my friends in the immigration advocacy community, as well as to my Democratic colleagues, I remind you that legislating is the art of the possible. Something I know we don't necessarily always get into our psyche, but hopefully it won't be for much longer. But we are in the minority in both chambers of Congress. The opposing party occupies the White House. We may not enjoy that reality, I certainly don't, but it is the reality nonetheless. And in this reality, sometimes stopping something bad from happening is our best shot at making something good happen. The best we can do is to stop something bad from happening in order to try to make something happen. But eventually, to make that something happen, we're going to have a compromise that brings others to this effort as well as we have here tonight. Without it, we fail the 800,000 dreamers counting on us to reach the finish line. To my Republican colleagues, I ask you to remember that tough concessions we had to make so that dreamers have a chance to earn citizenship in the country they know and love. In short, this deal was negotiated in good faith, with both sides making tough decisions in service of the greater good. And what good could be greater than keeping American families together? Consider the fact that 25% of DACA recipients are the parent of a United States-born child. So I refuse to believe that we are a country that tears young mothers and fathers away from American children and send them back to countries they don't even know. Let me close by reminding us we all, I'm sure, were at celebrations on Monday for remembering the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. It was he who said, quote, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time." My friends, the fierce urgency of now, as my colleagues have talked about, is confronting us yet again. We cannot let the clock run out on the American dream. We cannot keep tearing families apart, and we cannot pass up this opportunity to make history right. Let's honor Dr. King's legacy by treating this crisis with the urgency it deserves. Join us, and together we can send this bill to the President's desk without delay. There's no time left to spare. If we want America's dreamers to have a future in this country, we must act as if tomorrow were today. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank my colleagues, and we yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Colorado.
in my typically classy fashion, I dropped the microphone when I was trying to speak. I was glad to yield to my friend from New Jersey when he told me the reason why, because I have 3 daughters at home, and if I were fortunate enough to have one of them here in Washington, I'd want to be having dinner with her too, instead of being here. But I am here tonight for them and for families, just like the other senators have talked about. My family has an interesting immigration history that people are surprised by sometimes when I talk about it. My mom and her parents were Polish Jews when World War II broke out, and miraculously they survived the Holocaust. They and one other member of the family survived, and they actually lived for 2 years behind the Iron Curtain that descended in Eastern Europe. They were able finally to get to Sweden, where they lived for a year. Then they came to Mexico, of all places, to Mexico City, where they lived for a year. And then they finally made it to America, a country they believed was the only place on the planet they could rebuild their shattered lives. And that's what they did. And they contributed mightily to this country. They contributed mightily to me, to my brother, and to my sister. And what I think about when I hear the stories that I hear from my colleagues tonight, what it makes me realize is that my family's story is not unique, but it is what makes America unique. Because you can't tell my family's story in almost any other country but this country. I had the chance when I was first in this job to go to Fort Carson in Colorado to a naturalization ceremony there. And there were 30 people from every corner of the globe in our uniform because they were fighting for America. But they weren't yet citizens. And they took the oath to that flag, and I used to carry around the list of the countries they came from because out of 30, only 2 came from the same country. 28 came from places all over the earth. And I sat there thinking to myself how lucky we are to live in a place where that could be true. It's not true in any other country on the planet. I want my children to grow up in the country I grew up in, a country that is a nation of immigrants committed to the rule of law. That's why I was grateful to have the chance to be part of the Gang of 8 that negotiated the comprehensive immigration bill. I was sorry when that didn't ever get a vote in the House because I think it would have passed had it been voted on in the House. And that bill, which contained $40 billion of border security, would be well on its way to implementation today. And I think our political debate as a country would be very different than the political debate we've been having now, which would be good for our country and remind us of the values that we share. But unfortunately, we're not in that position today, and we're left with a problem of trying to deal with the fact that the executive order that President Obama wrote for the DACA population has been set aside by this president, who then said Congress needs to figure out what to do about it. And that's why we're here tonight. And we have had a negotiation now for more than 4 months with what has evolved into the Gang of 8. I'm very pleased that in that effort we were joined by the presiding officer, who's my colleague from Colorado. We are the only state that has 2 senators on this Gang of 6. And one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. And I thank my colleague for his courage and for his leadership at a moment when there are a lot of reasons why this isn't a comfortable place to occupy. But I think it says something about Colorado that at a moment when we have all this craziness going on in Washington, and at a moment when the country can't see any sign of a bipartisan pulse here, when our approval ratings hover somewhere between 9 and 15%, there's a reason there's a Democrat and there's a Republican from Colorado who are actually trying to solve a problem on the floor of this Senate with our colleagues, and that's because Colorado is an excellent place to live and an excellent place to be from. The citizens of Colorado have watched the train wreck over the last 10 years in this Congress from a state that is 1/3 Democratic, 1/3 Republican, and 1/3 independent. They have to work together to get anything done. Nobody gets their way all the time in the state of Colorado. And they expect this place to work like that as well. And it doesn't work like that enough. So I want to thank, again, my colleague from Colorado. I want to thank Senator Durbin, who's here, Senator Menendez, and I also want to say to Senator Flake and Senator Graham, thank you for your courage. When you put together a compromise like this, which I think is a good compromise, it's not the bill I would have written if it were my decision. I would have had a 5-year path for the Dreamers, not a 12-year path or a 10-year path in some cases. I would have had a 5-year path. If I were writing this bill, I wouldn't have insisted that parents of Dreamers, children of Dreamers not be able, Dreamers not be able to sponsor their parents. The hour is late. It's actually not that late. We should be working. But I understand why the Republicans who negotiated this in good faith needed those concessions. I understand it. I'm not thrilled with the president's idea that we need to build a wall to secure the southern border. I do believe strongly we need to secure our southern border. Just as I know the Republicans that have been in this negotiation believe, as I believe, that there should be a pathway for citizenship for a population of people in our country who know no other country but the United States of America, any more than my own children know any other country besides the United States of America. And there isn't, unfortunately, anybody else to do this work, except for the 100 members of the United States Senate and our friends in the House of Representatives. So our tendency has been to just avoid it and to put it off. And we don't have that luxury anymore because they're no longer protected. Every day in my state, there's another family broken up because of the deportation that's going on. And I don't think there's anybody, virtually nobody, who's a member of this body who believes the answer for the Dreamers is that they should be deported or that families should be split up. We may have disagreements about how to get there, but that's what the last 4 months of negotiation have been meant to sort out, to find a middle spot where we could land and where we could get not every vote in the Senate, but more than 60 votes in the Senate, and where we could get a bill passed in the House of Representatives. And I think we found it. And one of the things we've done is meet the 4 requirements that the president said he wanted when he had us over to the White House. One was DACA, that's the Modified Dream Act. One was border security. We've got $2.7 billion of border security in this bill. One was ending what he calls chain migration, which for the DACA population we do by saying that no parent can be sponsored by any child. And he said that he wanted to get rid of the diversity lottery, which we do. He may not love every part of it. I don't expect anybody to. But I do think this is the way we can move this forward. And I think we should move it forward. Bob Menendez talked about the fierce urgency of now. We treat this place, we treat the lives that are affected by the decisions we make, or in most cases, the decisions we don't make, as collateral damage that somehow we shouldn't concern ourselves with. I don't think we should go home until we address this. I don't think we should leave Washington until we address this. And I actually will say I agree with something Senator Graham said. Because of these crazy continuing resolutions, and let me just say, in case there is the unlikely event there's anybody actually watching this on television right now, a continuing resolution is no different than a temporary budget. That's all it is. And now we've gotten to the place where we were running the government on continuing resolutions for the last 10 years or so. We've passed 30 continuing resolutions. We didn't get our work done at the end of the year for some reason, so now we're going to do the work we should have done at the end of the year with a continuing resolution. They're now talking about another 2-week continuing resolution. Every time you hear the word continuing resolution, you should think of it as a temporary budget. That's what it is. It might be hard to understand it because not a single school district in our state, or a single municipality in our state, or not a single state among the 50 states would ever run their affairs this way. But for the last 10 years, that's the way we've run the government. In a game of chicken, of fiscal cliffs and government shutdowns and continuing resolutions, we are now enacting laws, Mr. President, that reflect the priorities of whoever was in the Senate 10 years ago. Because that's the last time we actually had a real appropriations process around here and a real budgeting process around here. So Senator Graham is right when he said what he said about the defense of this country. Because of continuing resolutions, we have aircraft that are grounded for lack of parts because the budgets make it impossible for them to plan. And that means that we can't train folks to fly those aircraft, to defend us if we have to do something on the Korean Peninsula or somewhere else. On the other hand, on the domestic side of things, since 1980, we have cut domestic discretionary spending in this country by 35% as a percentage of our GDP. And the presiding officer knows as well as I do that that if you're in rural Colorado 10 years ago, you didn't hear much about opioids. But now when you have a town hall in rural Colorado, or when you live there, as the presiding officer does, you know that people actually have less access to treatment today than they did 10 years ago. And I think that's a consequence of our inability to budget properly around here and the inability to deal responsibly with our fiscal matters. It's like we have a head cold, a perpetual head cold around here that robs us of our ambition to actually do anything, or our energy to actually do anything. And I'm afraid that's infected this discussion about DACA as well. So I want to close just by saying this is the moment when we need to do this. There's not going to be another alternative that can be supported by 60 senators here, potentially by the president, and by the Dreamers. And we're not going to succeed at passing a piece of legislation if the Dreamers feel like we're doing something to their parents that we would never accept for our own families. That's their bottom line. I've been amazed by the young people that I've met over the years, and most recently in this debate, who are saying to me, don't sacrifice my parents for me. I would rather deal with the uncertainty of my position than know that a trade was made that I can't live with for the rest of my life. And that's at the heart of this compromise here. And I think it's entirely consistent with our traditions and values as Americans. Entirely consistent with that. So my hope is that all of us hear the voices of these dreamers that are contributing at their universities and in our workplaces all over the country, just like our own sons and daughters. And we actually do something around here for once that's not predictable. And that the American people will cheer for. Just as the people in Colorado are glad, not every single one, but by and large, the people in Colorado are glad that the presiding officer and I are working on this. And the only way that's going to happen is if we find a way to come together over the next couple of days and do something other than what people say we're fated to do, which is have another interruption in the activities of our government over a political disagreement when the parties are actually much closer than they've been for a long time. We have a good compromise. We have a good piece of legislation. We have a piece of legislation that, if it were put on the floor, could get 60 votes. And I want to just close by, again, thanking my colleagues. You know, there's a lot around this place that I feel embarrassed about. But I think that if the American people could have seen the negotiation that went on for 4 months, they would have been proud of what they saw, because they would have seen Republicans and Democrats coming together not to have one more political fight, but to actually solve a real challenge that's facing our country, and to do it in a way that is consistent with our traditions as Americans. And so I hope in the next couple of days we have the chance to pass this bill. I thank my Republican colleagues who signed on to the bill today for giving us the momentum we need to move into the next day or two. And I look forward to succeeding around here for once. Once again, I want to thank my colleague from Colorado, the presiding officer, for his partnership on this legislation. I think it's meant a great deal to the people that he and I represent, and I, as a Coloradan and as a constituent of his, I want to thank him for the position that he's taken. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.